it's a title issue, and if I fix it, I won't lose $50,000. If I don't fix it, it'll cost me a lot of money.
How much will you make?
Title issues, understanding title is real important, super important. I wish I could get my office to understand it.
Okay. All right. We are live. So let's go ahead and kick off. Welcome everybody to our weekly live training right here in the group. Tonight, we're going to continue our theme of the month, talking about subject to and creative financing. And put Ray on the spot. This will show you a little bit about his experience. He's going to be in the car and going to be able to talk about this. So
I was trying to escape from you guys, and y'all tracked me down.
We can't get enough of you, Ray.
No, I completely forgot about this. And we really did have a little crisis, and we had to get in your car and get some documents signed. So anyway.
All right. So did you want to talk a little bit about the networking event we had this past Saturday? We're going to be doing that again on the second Saturday of every month.
Well, especially we're going to start simulcasting it, I'm sure, really quick. And especially for people that are close to the Houston area, 30, 50 miles away. We had a really great turnout. It's a really super location. It's on the West Loop, which is kind of near downtown, but it's a Saturday morning from 8:30ish to 12 noon. And it's a great time because you can come to it and then still do things in that day, not lose a whole day. And there isn't no alcohol. Last week we brought breakfast for whoever got there, and there was enough, or there was some left. Then you're one of the lucky ones. So, but good turnout, lots of fun, lots of engagement. I think what I want to do, James, I didn't tell you this, but I think I want to start. This last few days, I've been dealing a lot with attorneys trying to deal with the title situation, and these are guys that just amazes me how much they know, because they deal with investors screwing things up on a regular basis. I think I want to try to get one or two or three in our attorney panel for next month as a part of the meeting. Not the main part of the meeting, but something where people can come and ask questions. Bring your questions and either get one, two, or three different attorneys. Maybe a probate attorney, maybe a title attorney, maybe a bankruptcy attorney, or just a general real estate attorney who does a lot of documents and things like that. And maybe have, a question and answer session along with people who have deals to present, and just normal networking stuff that makes it kick butt time. So.
All right, that sounds like a plan. That's a good idea. I would love to have that, and I'm sure our viewers would love that too. As you guys are coming on, like I always ask you guys to do, drop a comment. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Give us a heart, give us a like, a thumbs up. And if you have any questions, drop them in the comment. And of course, if you like what you see, give us a share as well. But like I said a few minutes ago, we're going to be talking a little bit about subject to and creative financing tonight. I'm going to ask Ray, there's three main topics I want to ask him about that are going to help you guys. So also pull out a pen and paper and take some notes. So Ray, the first question I have for you is, when you're talking to sellers, what is a good way, whether you're a wholesaler or you're a buyer, what is a good way to talk to a seller and present the subject to or a creative finance deal?
So the sub two is kind of like one kind of class of a creative deal, but there's a lot of different options. I think the first thing, it goes without saying, most people know this, is you got to get people to know you and trust you and like you, and you've got to build some rapport with them. You can do presumptive statements such as how much of this are you going to finance, or how long will you finance this for? You can kind of ask those questions, and if you ask a person a question like, and it's a yes or no answer, if they say no, it's hard to get them to retract that. So we don't want to ask those kinds of questions. Now, if it's sub two, a sub two is going to, typically a sub two is with a motivated seller, but not always. And a sub two just means you're taking over existing financing and you're going to be responsible for paying off the mortgage. We've paid thousands of those mortgage payments. We've paid off. It's nice when this happens, but we've paid off a lot of those mortgages. And so now that's not something that happens overnight, but remember, as we're paying off the mortgage, it's being paid off by the tenant or the buyer. They're paying off that mortgage and we're making a spread. So we make money the whole way, and then the mortgage gets paid off. And then if the property appreciates, like last year in Texas, pretty much all properties appreciated about 20% per year. So that's more net worth from appreciation than from rental income. That blows me away, because rental income might be 5%, but to have appreciation of 20%, it's 3 or 4 times more than what you would get. So how you talk to them, is real important. If they know and trust you and like you, and you've got some credibility and you can demonstrate the credibility, people are likely to work with you. And if you're dealing with sub twos, oftentimes those are motivated sellers. So it's easy to do if you know how to ask it right. Like when we're negotiating, the word sub two never comes out of my mouth, because a sub two is like it's like being a doctor using a medical term. People don't want to hear medical terms. They want to hear, like, what do I need to do and how do I do it, and put it in layman's terms. And we do that all the time. We start talking to people and we lose them. They just don't understand. And anytime somebody's going through this and you start talking about their loan and all that stuff, it's very, very confusing. And you have to internalize that. You have to really, really know that anything you say is going to be real confusing. In fact, just one of the things I love teaching the time value of money. And that's when you're teaching time value of money to an audience, when you look out into the audience, and if they've never been exposed to that, it's like they've got the deer in the headlight looks. And so you just got to slow down. You've got to give real life stories of how you set this up, why you set it up this way, how you talk to the people. And that's what we do. Like when we're teaching, we'll almost always use case studies. In my case, they're real case studies, because we've been doing this for 38 years. So I'll use real case studies of how we did it, how we solved that problem, how, if you're the listener, in other words, in most cases, it's going to be the seller, sometimes the buyer, but how, if you're the listener, what you say, the language you use, I always thought of attorneys as wordsmiths, not like a blacksmith, but a wordsmith. And they have to become very expert with the language and the words and the terms and how they present it, their timing. So we have to become really big students of how to communicate and give people the information they need without confusing them. Because the confused mind always says what? No. The confused mind always says no.
Because they're confused. They don't want to commit to something they don't know everything about. So if you were talking to me, though, what kind of the way that I framed the question, I wanted to give our listeners, our viewers, our audience something to kind of walk away with. What would be 1 or 2 ways that you would tell me, pretending I don't know anything about subject 2, and I'm a homeowner, motivated seller, what is 1 or 2 things you would tell me to convince me or say, hey, this is the best way to do it?
So I don't think you can do it in 1 or 2 sentences. It's the whole thing. It's the whole package. It's how you look. It's how you perceive. It's how you talk and communicate. It's how you carry yourself. It's the whole package. Most people who are members of most people who deal with the Better Business Bureau, they know that you have to write a check to the Better Business Bureau. They know that if you don't get complaints, you're probably going to get a pretty good rating with a Better Business Bureau. But the perception in a lot of consumers' minds is that the Better Business Bureau means more than what it really does. But that's a part of one of those things. You have to have those tools working for you. If you have referrals, if you have pictures, any of those things, the car you drive up in, how you hold yourself, how you listen, all those things add up to effectively communicating and getting people to know, trust, and like you. And so once you do that, yeah, there's words that you can throw out there. There's zingers that you could throw out there. But I think it's just, you have to have the whole package. I mean, like, have a picture of a house that you've had for 15 years. Have a referral printed up that show what you're doing. Have it on your website where people are saying, hey, they offered this property for me. They took it off my hands. They followed through. They did everything timely. Have those things in your phone and show it to people and get them to believe in you and get them to trust you. If you do a transaction with somebody, have them write a letter. You can have a credibility file where it can be like a 3-ring binder, and it can be credibility letter after credibility letter after credibility letter. And then, so how you say what you're going to say, as far as like explaining a sub two, like I said, we don't ever use the word sub two. I always talk about it like, what do you want to accomplish? That's one of the first things out of my mouth after we build a little rapport and say, tell me, what is it that you want to do? And if it's a motivated seller, ultimately they want the problem to go away. And oftentimes, but not always, and you can't assume this, and this is why we ask and talk and ask and talk. Oftentimes, it's not money. And so if you were to offer money and the problem is not money, you're not syncing up with the needs of that seller. And the other thing is, think about the difference between what people want and what they need. They'll often take what they need, especially if they have limitations in their time or options, then they'll take what they need and not necessarily what they want. So you have to kind of find out what that is. And the other thing is, I do believe in win-win relationships in this kind of scenario, because I'm not trying to take advantage of somebody. I'm trying to give them a fair price for their property, and I'm trying to make it work for them. I'm trying to make it work for me. And sometimes you got to walk away from it. And as you get better and better with negotiating, which that's why we teach that class, because we want to be experts at negotiating. When you get better at negotiating, you realize just how much of a weapon negotiating is. And so you've got to treat people fairly, and they know that. If you routinely lie to people, you really can't look people in the face, unless I guess you're, I don't know, a sociopath or whatever. But if you're pretty much follow through on your promises and keep to your word, it's easy to look people in the face and be honest with them. And if you don't know if you can follow through, you can always say things like, hey, we'll try. You can always try as hard as you can. Doesn't mean you'll always be successful. But if you're looking for zingers, I mean, there's always zingers. Like one of the things I would do is, what happened? Okay, that's not supposed to do that. James, you with me?
I'm here. I can hear you, but I can't see you.
I think my shoe answered the phone.
There you are. There you are.
Okay. Yeah, in case y'all don't know, I got stuck in the car and I'm using my shoe as a tripod. So that's probably a first. Can you still see me?
Yeah, I can see you now. We're good to go.
Okay, because I can't see anything on the screen.
So we had something come through as maybe like a question or suggestion on what somebody could say. So I'm gonna read it and then you let me know what your thoughts are. So this would be somebody talking to a seller. We can take over your mortgage from now on. You don't have to worry about it. We can give you what you need to walk away happy, and we take over the burden of those payments and the property.
Yeah, she's suggesting that as something to say.
Yeah, so that was something that somebody asked. Would that be something that you could say?
Yeah, I think that's almost perfect. I wouldn't start out that way. Because and it's not fair to say she would start out that way either. She was just trying to be more specific. But the first thing I would do is say, like, what is it that you're trying to solve? Okay, and then I would say, well, what is it that you need out of this? And then if they say, well, I really need money to move out of here and put a down payment on another place, or buy an RV, or buy a car, or whatever, then then you can kind of go into that and say, well, the way we can handle that is we can take over making the payments and then pay you what you need. Would that work for you? And as an engineer-minded person, and for half the audience that are listening, they're the same way. They're going to tend to make a huge mistake. They're going to tend to over explain things, and they're just going to confuse them and confuse them and confuse them. I'll never forget, I went to many 30 years ago, I went to an FHA closing, and I think they've actually improved it, but I went to an FHA closing, and I'm sitting there as a seller of property, and there's the buyer, and the title company, that escrow lady sitting there at the title company. I'll see you later. The escrow lady sitting there started explaining the closing documents. And these are documents. They're complicated. They're, multiple pages. There's using legal jargon. And that pile, James, was like 1.5 to 2 inches thick. And I looked at that pile and I said, man, I'm going to learn something from this lady to see how in the world she gets through 2 inches of piles of paper. And so she starts, and I think now FHA loans, they've gotten rid of, they had like a paperwork reduction kind of act. But she started talking, and she'd say, here, sign here. She'd lift the paper and say, sign here. And then she'd get another paper and say, oh, this is where the seller's giving you ownership of the property. There's like 500 words on it, right? This is where the seller, here's where you're promising to pay the bank, sign here. And she'd basically give like a 1-sentence statement and then say, sign here. And I'm not telling you how to negotiate your deals, how to put them together, how to talk to buyers and sellers in that sense. But what I saw as an engineer, I would try to explain every friggin' paragraph on there. And if you're an engineer, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You get in there and you say, oh, no, this paragraph, the reason we have this here, and the next thing you know, you're having a 5-minute conversation on every paragraph. After 15 paragraphs, the people are so twisted and confused, they don't have a clue what's happening. And so the confused mind is going to say no. So based in what she said, it wouldn't be the first sentence out of my mouth, but it'd be pretty close to the third or fourth sentence.
But the main thing is to keep calm and keep it simple.
Keep it simple, stupid. And keep it simple, stupid. Remember that, because if you don't keep it simple, you're stupid. Okay? And just keep it simple. Talk on a 5th grade level at all times. And I'm telling you, that's the way to communicate with the human race, is you got to keep it simple. When I talk to my wife, she sometimes can get real upset, and she's reading a lot more into what I'm saying, or she's carrying emotions and feelings to the conversation. And she's responding to how the inflection of my voice, the tone, how calm I am. And so you've got to understand that. You got to try to figure out what the baggage is that they're bringing to the conversation, what impact that has on them. If somebody says, like, for example, your very first conversation, they'll say, well, tell me how this works. Well, what does that mean when they say, tell me how that works? And I'll tell you what it means. There's a really good chance that they want to know more about you. They don't trust you, right? There are people who meet you, they trust you, they trust the whole world, right? They trust everybody. And then there's people who don't trust anybody. And then there's people who generally trust people, but their mother-in-law said, hey, these guys that buy houses, they're going to rip you off, or you watch the Channel 5 News, and the Channel 5 News talks about the latest scam that, senior citizens, or Social Security scam that senior citizens are going through. So a lot of people are bringing preconceived notions, and your idea, your strategy is to get them to know you, trust you, like you, find out what their problem is, try to give them a solution to their problem that works for you. And oftentimes paying, if it's a sub two where we don't want to pay off the mortgage, that's the least of their problems. That is oftentimes the most insignificant. I mean, sometimes it's an inheritance. Somebody's a sibling or a parent of the owner, and now they become the owner. They're not even personally liable for that loan. So, it's not like you're going to ruin the credit of somebody who's passed away. So so that's not even a concern of theirs. Another thing is when we're trying to get owner finance, this all is the same thing with owner finance. And think about what the people are trying to accomplish. For example, a lot of people say, no, I just want to get all cash. Well, why do they want all cash? What are you going to do with all cash? Put it in the bank and get 1% when I can pay you 5 times that? It doesn't make sense. Or what are you going to do? Get all cash? You're 80 years old. And you might think if you're dealing with an 80-year-old, their first thought is probably what your first thought is. They don't want to do a 30-year financing. And then they think, well, I'm only going to be here for 3 years. Well, what's going to happen if we put $100,000 in your checking account and in 3 years, your kids end up with $75,000 or $80,000 cash, whatever's left? What's going to happen with that money? And if you're a grandparent or parent, you're thinking like, yeah, what will happen with that money? Will they burn through that money in a month or a year and go buy a lot of toys? And then 5 years later be broke and homeless and trying to make money on the side of the street. So if we think about what their solutions should be, what their goals should be, and help them understand what those goals are, then we can kind of fit a creative deal with that. And we might say to that parent or grandparent, well, wouldn't it be nice if they had an annuity coming in for the next 20 years and they knew if nothing else happened in their life, they'd always have a place to stay or food, a hot meal that they can buy or make their car payments because they've got that mortgage payment coming in? Wouldn't that be a great legacy, a great way to take care of your children? So, and a lot of parents that are selling, they don't want their kids to have the money because their kids will squander it. They've spent 40 years watching their kids squander everything they've got. So there's a lot of ways to think about stuff. And I think if you deal with their problems and you deal with the problems that maybe they don't realize that they have, but will have, then I think you can structure deals better.
Yeah.
Are you still there, James?
Yeah, that's a good segue. You actually kind of talked a little bit about the next question because I said there was 3 main areas or topics that I wanted to cover tonight. And the next topic that I wanted to get into as far as subject 2 is concerned would be what are some of the benefits, not only for the buyer, but also for the seller for letting somebody like an investor take over their mortgage. For example, everybody knows that it's, going to help their credit, but there's other benefits as well. Like it prevents a foreclosure potentially as well.
Well, I could tell you every sub 2 we've ever done, the people's credit got better. Didn't get worse, it got better. So that's one thing. If they don't do the sub 2, a lot of times sub 2s happen because people are going to get foreclosed on. And you could talk to them about forgiveness of debt and what that impact is on them. You could talk to them about your history of, hopefully if you have a history, if not, you can tell them how it can work, about how they can actually get new financing. We have people all the time that we're taking over their financing and they go out and get another loan with another lender. That's very doable. So I think that's one of the things that you can do. And just repeat your question, James, to make sure I'm answering the right question.
What are some of the benefits for the seller for allowing somebody to come in and take over the payments, whether it be catching up or just straight up taking over?
Seller and buyer. So again, with the benefits of the seller is that they're able to make the deal where they might not be able to make it otherwise. if they need to get all cash for a house that's very hard to finance, then they may end up taking less because the people are going to give a bigger discount because the buyer has to bring more money to the table. And that's exactly what I say to the buyers, sellers. I'll say this oftentimes, and I'll say this, I'll typically do like that closer did with the FHA stuff. I'll say, this is this, and this is why I need this. So tell me about this. So in other words, tell me about your financing. Well, nobody wants to ask that question. And I know because our students routinely won't ask that question, and it's incredibly important. And it's a real easy way to ask. They just don't have the confidence. Until you do it 10 or 20 times, you just don't have the confidence. But I'll say something like, hey, I need to know, in order for me to make the best possible offer and get as much money in your pocket, I need to know about things like the underlying loan and what the status is. Because there's things we can do, we may be able to take over the payment and make the payments, but the more I know about this, the better offer I can make. And the other thing I'll say oftentimes, another line I'll use oftentimes is, the less money I have to bring to the table, the less cash, the more I can offer, the more I can put in your pocket. So if I have to bring $100,000 in cash to the table to pay off a $90,000 mortgage, and then give you a net of $5,000 or $6,000, if I can take over that payment, I might be able to get, instead of getting you $5,000 or $6,000, I might be able to get you $10,000 or $12,000. So, and that's how I just started. I'll just say, look, the less cash I have to bring to the table, the more I can put in your pocket. And it's counterintuitive, and I might even say that too. And I'll say, do you understand? No, I don't understand. And then you explain it, because I have a cost for getting money. My getting money costs me money. Just funding it. When you went and bought this house, you had to pay origination, you had to pay points, you had to pay appraisal, you had to pay survey, you had to pay lender markup costs, you had to pay the title, you had to do all these things. If we take over the existing mortgage, that money that I would normally pay to bring that money to the table, I can put in your pocket. Now, what's the benefit to the buyer? The benefit to the buyer, of course, is that now this property is more valuable. If you're a wholesaler, it's a lot more valuable to the market out there, because instead of the few people that can bring $100,000 plus repairs on a broken down house, if let's just hypothetically say that's 2 people out of 10. Well, now that you're taking over the existing $90,000 loan, now you've got 5 people. So you've got a basically 150% increase in potential buyers. So if you can increase the number of potential buyers on your deal because you structure it better, because you structure it creatively, then you should be able to either, at the minimum, move it better, move it faster, and potentially move it with making even more money. So definitely, the better and more the more buyers and the more desirable the structure is, the more it's worth to whoever's going to buy it. That's if you're a wholesaler. If you're a buy and hold person, let's say you can do 3 out of 4 deals, it's all cash, but that 4th one's a creative deal. That means every 4th deal you do is a creative deal. And that means to me that if you're doing 1 deal a month, which anybody should be able to do 1 deal a month, once they figure out, it takes 6 months to do the first deal, because you got to jump through all the hoops if you don't know what you're doing and figure it out. And I mean, I have to be honest with you, it's kind of the grind of coaching, because with the coaching, we're dealing with the fundamentals. But then once they get it, then all of a sudden now, once they do that first deal or 2, now they can really do that deal a month if they really want to. And if you're doing that deal a month, if they really work it, they can do a deal a month. And that means if you're doing 4 deals and 1 of them you can do creatively, now with that creative deal, that's your buy and hold. And then you get 3 to 4 of those a year, and in 3 years, you'll be financially free. You won't have to be wholesaling. And then all of a sudden, that number will change to 2 deals out of 4 you'll be able to hold on to. Right now, James, we're holding on to almost everything. I don't even think in terms of fixing a property up and flipping it. The only way I'll do that is if it's just not a good buy and hold, but the margins are so good. And guess what? That makes me a don't wanter, because I am not going to be flipping houses unless they're just killer deals. So I am not doing any marginal flip deals. There are not marginal. Marginal is not even on my radar. If you don't learn how to buy and hold, and you don't learn how to structure these deals, and you don't learn how to talk to sellers, you're going to be doing marginal buy and hold deals. And we don't want to do that. So be a don't wanter. Get in a position where you've reached your financial freedom number and just do the deals you want to do.
So are you telling all the wholesalers, Ray, are you telling all the wholesalers out there that are watching us right now to bring you their deals and you'll be their buyer?
Oh yeah. Yeah. If you want me to take the lion's share of the money you should be making, I won't argue with you.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions right now so far? I mean, that was quite a bit. Ray kind of went down that little rabbit hole. As you guys know, his nickname is Rabbit Hole Ray. Well, one of his nicknames.
Well, that's some crap you and Pat came up with.
No, we came up with Jefe Grande, but you don't like that one either.
That's because it's a cuss word. I know it in some language it's a cuss word.
We'll look that up and we'll show it to you that it's not. But okay. We have one more topic that we want to get into, but I want to give our audience an opportunity to ask a question or two that they may have in regards to subject to. Hey, Hal says you're Big Chief. What do you think about that one?
I'm big what? Big cheese? Okay, I can do that.
All right.
I really don't want to be there. I just want to kind of suck away in the shadows.
So, but what I'm getting to is I want to talk about what makes a good subject to deal, but I do want somebody to have an opportunity to ask a question. But before we move any further, while somebody's asking their questions, we have something coming up on the 25th that you want to talk about, Ray.
Yeah, James talked me into this and he's working me to death. I think he's afraid I'm going to die on him or something. But on the 25th, it's going to be live and Hal, it's going to be Zoom too, right, Hal? And Hal is an amazing technology expert. I mean, he also has sponsors like our shows and stuff. So he's a gunslinger for hire, anything technology. I kind of like the technology stuff and I like asking Hal those questions, but yeah, so it's going to be a Zoom and live. If you can make it live, it's going to be better. I would travel. It's going to be probably, I think it's scheduled for 5 or 6 hours, and we're going to dive deep into looking at the ways to figure out how much money you're making on a creative deal, because it's a little complicated, and that right there take an hour because we just have to do some basic math kind of stuff. And then the next thing we're going to do is dive deep into what a sub-2 is, how it works, what kind of language you use, the questions that you ask, sort of like what we're talking about tonight. But we're actually going to look at the documents. We're going to show diagrams of how it actually set up and how we set it up. And then we'll look into some case studies of how you can make a deal as a wholesaler versus a flipper versus a buy and hold, and show you how we can just make little changes and you can step out of the wholesale category on a lot of your deals, not every one of them, but a lot of your deals, and step out of the flipping category and step right into the buy and hold category and still put as much money in your pocket or close to as much money as in your pocket as you would if you did the first two scenarios. And it really is doable. And I think that wholesalers, when you go to work every day, you got stakeholders. You got a wife or family or children. You got stakeholders, and you have a responsibility to be the best you can. And you owe it to yourself to not just work your butt off and let somebody else make all the profit. You need to find out what is it that can make me a buy and hold kind of person, and then I can change my future or my family's future. When we started, I want to say 26 when we bought our first house, maybe 27. and I was working for a corporation, and I worked there another 4 or 5 years, and Audie and I kept buying more and more houses, and finally, one of us had to quit, and so I was kind of the ringleader, but I mean, Audie was also pulling his weight, no question about it. What a great partner he's been my whole life. But I quit my job, and then a year later, his wife, who was doing the books and the rentals and stuff like that, she quit her job. And a year or two after that, Audie quit his job. So we were in '88. I was the first one to quit, and then about '89, Connie quit her job, good paying job, and then I think '90 or '91, Audie quit his, and we've never gone back the other direction, you know. And now our family works for us. It's been a good ride, and it's I think I got lucky in that I started hanging out with Jimmy Napier and Jack Miller, some super great coaches in the very beginning, and they understood that, hey, this is about buy and hold. This is not transaction-based business. You know, a realtor, for example, it can be hard for a realtor to ever stop working because there's nothing that's making money when they're sleeping. And investors who are buying and wholesaling, pardon me, not buying, wholesaling, investors who are wholesaling or flipping, they're like a realtor. And there's just no way to quit, because when you quit, then there's nothing that generating income. So we've got to take it to the next level. We've got to understand, how does an asset work for us when we're not working it? And the way we do it is we find those right assets, we put them in our portfolio, and then we manage the portfolio. So it's not 100% passive, but it's so close to being passive. And it really could be passive if we were willing to give up more of the profit. We don't recommend that. We don't want it to be passive in the beginning. We want you to become knowledgeable on property management. We want you to become knowledgeable on rehabs. We want you to become knowledgeable on understanding how to fix the money so you get the best kinds of deals. And then once you build that expertise, then when these curveballs are thrown at you, you can jump right into them and make money in every possible way. Hopefully that makes sense.
It does. So guys, if you want to take part in this class, there is an investment. It's $100, but just drop the comment deep dive in the comments, and I'll be sure to send you the registration link and make sure that you get signed up for that. It's going to be on the 25th from 10:30 to 2:30, and it'll probably end up going to about 3:30 because it will end up being about 5 hours. But drop that in the comments so I can get the information to you. I haven't seen any questions come through, so let's move right along.
Well, one thing, let me just say if you guys come to that, make sure you get a lot of sleep. Make sure you got coffee or your caffeine with you, because it will be like drinking from a fire hose. I will be going real fast. We'll be stopping and asking questions, answering questions, or we may save them to the end if it gets out of control. But if you've ever been in anything I've ever taught, it's all content, and I don't hold back. I don't try to sell you into the next thing. So we're really going to deliver the content on that, and it's going to be really more. If you're starting from zero, it's going to be more than what you can grasp. But that's okay, because if you get 25% or 50% of it, you'll be able to at least know how the deal works and probably get it and be able to pull it off on your own. And so that's what my goal is, to get it to where you may not be an expert at it, but to get it to where you can do these kinds of transactions, these creative deals on your own.
Yeah. So again, that'll be next Saturday in person and on Zoom. But Ray, while everybody is typing those comments in, and you may have already touched on it a little bit, but what makes a good subject to deal? Like, what are some of the things that you look for that would be good signs to make it a good sub to?
And that's going to be, make sure we ask that question on that Saturday, the 25th, James, because I can tell you some of it, but I have to actually show you with drawings on other parts of it. what makes a good subject to deal, there's several things that make a good sub to deal. One is a motivated seller. Okay, so that makes it easier. Foreclosures, for example, make tons of sub twos. If you're doing foreclosures and you don't master sub twos, you're throwing away most of the money in these deals. Okay, so motivated sellers make a good sub two. Another thing that makes a good sub two is the underlying terms of that note. For example, and I'll show this graphically. And this is where we kind of have to use there's a little bit of numbers or a little bit of a calculator, but I'll show you how to figure out time value of money. But we can show you graphically where, let's say you have a 30-year mortgage. Well, when you have a 30-year mortgage, about year 20, about 50% of that's paid off. And what happens is as the mortgage gets older, then most of your payments going directly to principal reduction, not interest reduction. So the problem, and I'm going to throw a name out here, so don't get mad at me. But the problem with getting an old mortgage is that the loan constant is too high, which anytime you hear somebody say loan constant, I want you to think of this in your mind: negative cash flow. High loan constant, low cash flow. They're the opposite of each other. So if we're buying old notes, they're being paid off, our equity is increasing rapidly, but there's a risk that we will have low cash flow. So we gotta fight those, and there's strategies you'll see, like in case studies, where we can fight those negative cash flows or those low cash flows. If it's a new loan, then of course you got a 30-year payoff, but you might have a new loan that you're taking over at 3 or 4%. And if you can wrap it at a 7% loan, or you can earn 6 to 8% on net on your rentals, then that's a 2 to 3 to 4% spread, maybe 5% spread between the cost of your money and what you're making on your money. And just think about that 4%. Let's say you can make a 4% spread on $200,000, and we'll show you the math how you figure this out. It's not that complicated once we run through it, but we'll spend a solid hour on this, and at the end of that hour, you'll understand. It'll be like slicing bread. It'll be so easy. But if you can get a 4% spread on $200,000, that's $8,000 a year. $8,000 a year divided by 12 is 600 something dollars a month in positive cash flow. So by understanding how the math works, understanding there's low cost money on the front end via the sub two, and then knowing how you can either with superior property management skills and rent enhancements, understanding how those work, then you can get that spread to be even bigger, or either do wraparounds. There's a couple strategies, and that's why I said, like, we do want to know how property management works. In the beginning, we do want to manage our properties. We do want to maybe get involved in some rehabs because we want to know, we want to be comfortable with them. We want to be familiar. What we don't want to do is do what I did and become an expert at rehabbing. That was a big mistake. Don't be an expert at rehabbing. Be an expert at putting deals together. And both of them take a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience. And if you become a deal maker, an experienced deal maker, a massive passive deal maker, you're getting to the end, or getting to the end zone, making that touchdown come a lot faster. So we do want to embrace property management, understanding money, rehabs, but that's not our focus. Our focus is making good deals, making sound deals, and being creative.
And we do want to encourage people to be the better deal makers, to buy and hold them for themselves. But regardless if you're going to wholesale or be that buy and hold guy, we want to help you make the better deals, become a better deal maker. Because ultimately, in the beginning, if you can learn how to make these kind of deals in the beginning, it'll just get you through. You'll see it. You'll be like, I don't want to wholesale. I want to hold this, or I don't want to flip. I know me personally, I've only been doing it 8.5, 9 years, and I'm tired of flipping myself.
You know, Audie and I our very first house we bought, we kept it for almost 30 years, and we did a 15-year mortgage on it. So this is, this is not, this is sort of like a sub two, but we did a 15-year mortgage on it, and then and the tenant's paying us, and we're making about $300 a month positive cash flow. And anyway, with that 15-year mortgage, pretty soon that 15-year mortgage got paid off. In fact, exactly 15 years after we borrowed the money. And so now we have a zero balance on the mortgage. And a lot of times people say, well, that's good enough. That's, I'm going to, instead of making $300 a month positive cash flow, now I'm going to make $1,000 a month positive cash flow. Now, if I would have sold it, I would have paid taxes and I'd had the money in the bank. But what we did, I could either just taken the cash flow and just been comfortable with that. But what Audie and I did is we went out and borrowed, I want to say $90,000 on that. This is a while back. But we ended up borrowing $90,000. We put that in our pocket. That's not a non-taxable event. And of course, we weren't just sitting on our hands. We actually took that $90,000 and then made down payments. Like on a sub two, you might need $10 or $15 or $20,000 to take it from it going into your portfolio to where you put it into drug production, right? 15 or 20,000. That means I can do 5 more properties with that 90,000, 4 to 5 more properties. And so all of a sudden I can create even more cash flow, but when I do a sub two, I'm typically buying equity. Like for 10 or 15 or $20,000, I might be buying $50,000 worth of equity. And I'm not taking personal liability on the loan. I'm not being approved for the loan. It's just, boom, I'm taking it over. It's very, very powerful. I don't know how you can explain it to somebody until I think intellectually you can see it, but until you just go through it and you think, oh my gosh, I didn't know this was even out here. And it's so doable.
So is there anything else? That's pretty much the end. We still don't have any comments, any questions that is coming through. So we have reached the end of our time. Is there anything else that you wanted to add in there as far as subject 2 goes?
No, I think for $100 are crazy if they don't go, because I'm not somebody that's done 3 of these and moved on. I've been doing them for 38 years. I've learned a lot of problems you had. In fact, I was talking to an attorney today, and he says, I remember those deals because I took a beating on them, because I learned my lessons. I made the mistakes. He said I had another attorney hand me my head in a basket, basically. And that's for you to attend that class. And I don't mean to be tooting my own horn, and we still make mistakes, but you're getting a lifetime of experience on putting these deals together. It's popular for everybody to talk about doing creative deals, and they, some of these guys have 3 and 4 or 5 years of experience, and my hat's off to them. And there's some really smart guys out there, but nothing teaches you like doing it and living with it and overcoming problems. And I would say that's what we get paid for, is solving problems. And we've been solving them for 38 years.
Well, cool. If there's nothing else, then let's go ahead and call it a night. Guys, again, if you want me to send you that registration link for this class, drop a comment, say deep dive, or, send it, pick me or something. Let me know that you want in on this, so that I can make sure that you get the link. Because I can tell you, again, not to toot, our own horns or anything, but I have been around Ray for 8 years. And just a little quick funny story, the very first time I heard Ray speak, he, it was just over my head, and I, ended up nodding off a couple of times. But I hung around him. My dad encouraged me. He's like, hey, this guy is really great. And I hung around him, and I've built that relationship. And now I can be around Ray if we do a whole weekend class, or, I spent a week in Florida with him, and I try to pick up something from Ray every time I'm around him, because there is so much knowledge that he has and so much experience. So I definitely encourage you guys, anytime we do these live streams, these live trainings, anytime we do an event, bring pen and paper and take notes, because Ray is very generous about giving, what I call golden nuggets and gems. He's willing to give out as much of his knowledge as he can. And that's all I got. So
no, James, I just want to add on to that. I've been the recipient of that. That's been given to me by some really good, smart guys out there. And that's the way it is when you're hanging out with people that are actually doing stuff. They're more dedicated to the solution and overcoming the problem than anything else. I mean, they get something out of that. And if it weren't for the people that gave generously to me, gave their knowledge and their experience, I'd have fizzled out a long time ago. So I'm just giving back what was given to me. I'm not doing anything that decent people don't do with each other.
And I appreciate that. Our audience appreciates that. So on that note, let's go ahead and call it a night so we can let Ray finish his journey home. And I'm going to start my journey home. So that's all I got. That's all we have. Y'all guys have a good night. We'll see you Saturday on our radio show, which is streamed on YouTube as well.
Okay. Thank you, James. Thank you, Hal.